Welcome to the Dateable AF podcast, because women dating women is wild, wonderful, and occasionally a disaster. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Kyle, a therapist in private practice.
And I'm your co-host, Rachel Howell, researcher extraordinaire.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dateable AF podcast. Today, we have a really exciting topic that you guys are going to love. It's called Lesbian Bed Death, Myth, Reality, or Just Bad Scheduling. We have a lot to say about this topic, and apparently our listeners do too, because you guys have already started telling us about your experiences here.
Yes. So we are going to give our listeners a notice right up front that there will be some explicit language probably used.
Right? We're going to have some explicit sex talk today. So if that bothers you, you should just turn around right now. Well, actually,
No.
back it up. Not right now.
Not now.
Because
Not now.
It counts as a listen if you listen to us for 5 minutes, I believe. So could you please just keep us on for 5 minutes so it'll count? You'll count as one of our listens for this week. We're trying to get our stats up, y'all.
We'll minimize how many times we say penis and vagina in the first 5 minutes.
First 5 minutes, that's right. So if you're in the car with your kids or your mom or anybody else who might make it awkward, it's okay. We'll try not to say anything for a few minutes anyway. Okay, well, Rachel, I would love to start with you as our resident researcher, just kind of defining this term for us. I know a lot of our listeners are familiar with the term lesbian bed death, but some of our listeners may not be familiar with this term, since I think actually the majority of our audience is probably not lesbian. So, so why don't you tell us what it means and if that differs from what people think it means?
Well, I think it means, unless you do research, but it definitely means that the term that's spread amongst women is meaning that you've stopped having sex in your relationship. So you may still be in your relationship and that you're at a point where you are no longer having sex. And I say that in the most simple terms of not having sex. And we're going to discuss that being a very heteronormative sort of term. And yeah, well, we're gonna open this up a bit in this conversation, because that is the traditional thought behind lesbian bed death: is all traditional forms of sex, you're no longer having them.
Okay. And I think that there might be some myths here that we're going to bust for you. I think we are going to share some real stories, not from Rachel or me. We will not be telling you any of our personal stories about this.
That's where I draw the line. I draw the line right there.
But we do have these friends named Monique and Veronica, and we won't be talking about them. And we also will give you a little bit of advice about what to do if any of this hits home for you.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the origin of this.
Okay. Yeah, where this term comes from.
Yeah, where this term comes from. So there was a study done in 1983 by a couple of guys, of course, that they were looking at lesbian bed death and heterosexual activity and comparing them. And that's where the sort of term started. And as I mentioned earlier, they were looking at and comparing very heteronormative sex. So they were thinking about frequency only, and then based around generally intercourse or just small variations off of that. And so we will learn along the way that actually that study has been it's been debunked for years now, because they broadened current research really broadens the aspect of what we call sex. And it's not just based on intensity. I mean, based on the number of times you have it in a month, but also how much pleasure it brings you, so on and so forth. So we'll discuss this. But that was where it started, and then became, what I don't know is whether lesbians started the term or it became a term. I think we started it on ourselves.
Maybe. I actually heard that it was started by the researchers who did that study, but who knows? It's been perpetuated over time. It's a commonly used term. I would like to pause for just a minute and talk about definitions of sex. Because I will say, as a therapist, that how I see the vast majority of people defining sex is that a penis is entering a vagina. And if that didn't happen, then there was no sex. If you think about, back to when you were a teenager and well, I guess I should say when we were teenagers, way back in the dark ages, it was taboo to have sex and for girls. And so I know lots of girls who participated in a lot of sexual activity, but because no penis entered their vagina, they said that they had never had sex before. And I think that has perpetuated itself because I hear adult women talk about this all the time. Like, oh, I went on a date. Well, did you have sex with him? No, I didn't. I just gave him a blowjob. So I think we need to expand this. And it's funny because my friends laugh at me when I say this, but I believe that if anyone has an orgasm, you got to call it sex. And if any orifice of your body was penetrated by anything, I think we're going to go ahead and call it sex.
And so that's relevant to you daters out there, because if you are being questioned about it, and then you can't say you're not having sex with multiple people. If you're doing those things that she just mentioned, you are having sex with, and that's okay. But you need to be honest about that when somebody asks you, because somebody may care. They may not want to date somebody that's having sex with other people.
Multiple partners. Absolutely.
Right. And so those things count, and you're sort of lying if you're sharing bodily fluids.
Yes. And that's the concern. That's why people want to know if you're having sex with someone else, generally, is because there is a health risk that could be involved in that if you're not taking care around it. So if we stick with the definition of a penis enters a vagina, then lots of lesbian couples literally never have sex. Because that is not that is not the way that a lot of lesbians have sex. And so we got to be a little more expansive here.
Well, yeah. Let's just say a penis attached to a man.
Right. I mean, that's true. But I will say, even if it's a penis that's not attached to a man, that's not the kind of sex that a lot of lesbians have. So despite, for those of you who are not in our target lesbian audience, you might think that that's how lesbians have sex all the time, but in fact, it is not. We were talking about this before the show about, there's a lot of preparation involved in that. You got the little bag. You got that bag in the top shelf of your closet. You got to pull it down and stuff.
That's a lot. It's a lot.
Got the accessories in it. Sometimes you just don't have the energy for all that.
And we will later discuss energy levels and the impact it has on sexual activity. But oh my God. Okay, I'm going to barely make it through this session. I can already tell I'm sweating over here. So I do want to go back to the term lesbian bed death, because did you know it is actually a Wikipedia entry?
What?
Yes.
I have no idea. I've never needed to look that up.
And I think I saw a suggestion of reterming that and to lesbian bed intimacies. And I think all our listeners out there, I think we should maybe try to get rid of that term, because we're going to talk a little bit more about the research, but the more current research disproves the lesbian bed death myth in a number of ways. And so I think we should maybe kind of own our own term of lesbian bed intimacies.
Okay, I like it. That way, maybe it's not necessarily just dead or alive, but we're looking at the depth of it or the intimacy of it. I like it.
Yes.
I like it. Okay, well, let's hear more about kind of what the double standards are and like, how did this become a stereotype? Tell me what you found out from the research.
So the current research, what it looks at is there is no doubt that over time, female to female long-term relationships have a different level, a lower level of frequency of sex.
Okay.
And than heterosexual couples. What is different, though, in the current research shows is that female-to-female sex may not happen as often, but there is a higher satisfaction level, and that it also includes a lot more diversity, and that there's a lot more romance, satisfaction, and also the sex act in and of itself is longer, lasts longer. So there's just a lot to be considered in here besides the one act in this conversation.
That makes a lot of sense. So if you think about that, like what do you think it is about sex between two women that brings more satisfaction than heterosexual sex? Overall, obviously, we're not talking about a case-by-case basis because that can vary, but in general.
A couple of things that were noted, that one is the willingness to try and have bigger variety, just generally, from fantasies to courting, flirting, candlelight, and music, and just a lot more of that going on in the background. There's always this conversation of women understanding women's bodies. I mean, that is in play for sure, but that's more of like an initial thing. If you're with somebody for a long time, everybody should work that out, or people aren't talking. But there's that just willingness to open up to different things. And then there is this just general emotional connection that women have. And again, it's not that men don't have it, so I don't want to stereotype, but generally, women move into that real deep emotional connection in an easier way and on a more regular basis as they're moving towards sex.
Yep. I think that is something I see on a regular basis, is that women typically feel connected with someone and then they start to feel sexual toward them. Men have sex and then they feel connected. And so I think the connection that happens between two women in a relationship is what precipitates the sex. So I could see how that would make the sex more satisfying.
Yeah. And just to be clear, at the end of the day, in the research, everybody's sex life falls off as the relationship goes on.
For sure. Yes. That if you meet someone who's brand new in a relationship in, let's say, month 3, and then you interview someone who's in year 20, those people are not typically having the same frequency of sex.
No, they're not.
Right.
And there's also, I've had somebody talk to me about this. It's a number of years ago. It was a guy, and I thought it was a very interesting look into it, the difference in sort of the dynamic tension and the way that men approach sex versus the way that women typically approach sex. And that approach oftentimes keeps a more active sex act going on, I think, in a heterosexual relationship because of the male just being driven, not by an intimate moment, but just by their bodies.
By sex drive.
Yes.
That is so true. And the other thing that I think is different here is that I don't know women who want their partner to say yes to sex just to appease them. That for most women that I know, your partner needs to be in it with you. They need to be equally desiring of sex as you, or it's not going to be satisfying. And I don't necessarily think the same is true for heterosexual relationships. I think a lot of times men want the act of sex. And I don't think, I want to be clear, I'm not talking about men being predatory, but I'm talking about a guy wants to get off. And if his partner gets off too, that's great. But if he gets off, then it's okay. Like, he wants his partner to say yes to sex. He doesn't necessarily, it's not as important if his partner's into it and enjoying it. I think it's better for him if she is, but in general, it's more about getting off. It's about the sex act.
Well, I want to bring this around to dating, because I think I really think is an interesting topic, is that if the research, and I believe it, all relationships will eventually, the sex will change, the timing, all of that will change as you grow old with somebody. And one thing that really jumped out at me is also that typically when you're first dating somebody and you're into them and they're into you, it can be pretty lusty, right? I mean, and so that level of intensity does not last forever. And so it brings up to me the greater point of, as you're dating, really thinking through the lust to the other really important things that need to be in place, because those are the things that are actually going to carry you through time with somebody.
Yes, for sure. The lust is great at the beginning. Like, that's a super fun part of it, but that's not the thing that's going to set the stage for compatibility necessarily in other ways.
Yeah. One thing I will say that I will say about myself in the dating process.
Do tell.
Only a smidgen I'm going to tell, but I do want, when I'm dating somebody, I do want to know that is a free conversation, and that whoever it is I'm dating, if I think that that's where we're going, then I want that to be a very open playground and an open opportunity, and not a tense, I can't talk about it, let's just turn the light off and crawl in the bed and do it thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because again, I feel like if you start off with somebody that way, when you actually really need to have the hard conversations, because there is a point where you do have to talk to your person about the rhythm, and maybe it doesn't match up, and you have to ask for what you need. You're going to have to talk about that, especially if you go through menopause with the person, all those things. And if you can't talk about it, then you're damn sure not going to be able to talk about it later on, right?
That's true. And sex is often a taboo topic in our culture in general, and people, depending on the messages you got from your family or your culture growing up, it's something that a lot of people don't talk about. And I'm always surprised. I will see couples, both lesbian couples and heterosexual couples and and gay men tend to be better about this. I think they talk more about it, but particularly with lesbians and straight couples, they're not talking about it. I will ask them a question about if they had an orgasm or if their partner had an orgasm last time they had sex, and the partner often doesn't know.
Oh.
And to me, that is so shocking. Like, that is a very basic level of communication around sexuality. And if you can't talk about that, or talking about what you like or what you don't like, or if you have a fantasy, those are vulnerable things to share, but they're also really important parts of building intimacy with someone.
Yeah. I'm curious about our listeners giving us feedback on this, because I'm guessing that there are some women who say, I'm not comfortable of that. I'm not comfortable addressing that early on. I need to fall in love with you, get to know you, and then I might, then I'm going to uncover that part of me, versus going, no, this is a part of the process. We're going to see if we're compatible.
Yeah.
In this way.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about, older rules in society that you didn't have sex until you got married, I mean, what if it was terrible and you were already married to the person for the rest of your life?
And there is this myth, don't you think, especially I think among older lesbians, this myth of, if I'm in love with you, it's going to be great. It's not going to matter.
Yep.
You think that's true?
It is absolutely not true. It's not true. That you could be really in love with someone and maybe they don't know what you like, or they're not very skilled. And I know that, in this round of the Dating Bee for you and in previous rounds of the Dating Bee for me, are you wondering what I'm going to say right now?
I am. I felt safer once you put yourself in it.
But I know that you've had some experiences with people with varying levels of comfort or discomfort in talking about sex or in exploring sexual things. And that's hard. When somebody's uptight about anything, what sex or other things, if somebody's uptight about, their house, not wanting anything to be out of place in their house, then you're going to feel uptight when you go into their house. And if they're uptight about sex, then you're going to feel uptight having sex with them. So it does matter.
It does. And we've laughed a lot about. So again, it is important. If you are not, I don't want us to sound judgmental. If you are the kind of girl that likes to turn the lights off and before you take your clothes off and you crawl under those sheets and then then you need to find another girl that is good with that.
This is true.
And I think that it is, I call there's sweet lesbian love. Lesbians know how to make some sweet lesbian love out there.
Is that the kind where you get under the sheets and turn the lights off, or is that a different thing?
First, listen to, I don't know, who did we used to listen to?
Marvin Gaye, Sexual Healing.
And then dim the lights, light a few candles. It's all good. I'm not complaining, but if you happen to be someone that likes to have a variety of opportunities, then you need to talk about that. If you don't always want things to happen that way, because again, everybody's going to experience a drop in their sexual routine with one another.
Sure.
And so you gotta know if you've got somebody who likes to zhuzh it up every now and then, to keep it active,
fresh. Yep.
Keep it fresh. And you're starting to date somebody that does not know how to spell the word zhuzh. I mean, I don't. Then, that's going to be problematic.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And I was going to make a joke about the being naked because I am what they call a never ending. I don't love to be naked. But I also don't have to turn off the lights but on a more serious note
I'm just going to keep my mouth shut on that.
Yeah, you should. Absolutely. I mean, I'm barely naked in the shower, let alone am I going to walk around the house naked, but not that y'all needed to know that. But some of us like that more than others. It's okay.
It's fine.
But on a more serious note around that, I think that this is part of what fueled that stereotype of lesbian bed death is because women, from the time we are small, are surrounded by shame around body stuff. We're too skinny, we're too fat, we're too muscular, we're not muscular enough. We're always being criticized or compared or shamed. And I think that creates problems with women when it comes to sexuality, because I think, I just think about going to the gym and there are dudes at my gym who have a big old belly and they're taking their shirts off and wandering around like that. And some of the fittest women that I know who have a six-pack won't take off their shirt because they don't feel comfortable. And so I do think that impacts when there are two women in the picture and two women who are probably grappling with food, weight, body stuff, that it can impact people's freedom to be sexual.
Yeah, I absolutely know that's true. I think it's a rare occasion when you put two women together that one of them hasn't gone through some pretty serious stuff around that.
Yeah. And I mean, along those same lines, I think not that men have not experienced sexual assault, because certainly many of them have, but anecdotally in my therapy practice, I would say well over half of the women that I've spoken to, I mean, with my friends as well, have had at least some kind of unwanted sexual experience, whether that is a full out sexual assault or whether it's being pressured into having sex when you didn't want to. Almost every woman I know has had something like that. And I think that impacts our ability to be sexual. So when you've got two women in a relationship, it can have an impact.
Yeah. It also, I was just thinking about the things that sort of the culprits of things that get in the way of us feeling safe, or we get in our own way because we put so much into the sex act that we push a relationship somewhere where it's not ready to go.
Yep.
And that's another thing that I just think you have to be clear with yourself about this. If you are a person who knows that once you cross the line into sex, that takes you to a level of intimacy that really directly correlates to love and wanting to be in it, that's fine. You just need to know it, and you need to not allow yourself to go there when the relationship isn't ready to go there.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely true. Yes, for sure. And so what do you think are some of the external factors that can impact sex within a lesbian couple?
Well, like I said, our age women, menopause.
Yeah. It's a real thing.
I think, yes. Also, a very stressful life. And if you're in the throes of either raising a family or you're actually at the peak of your career, you're going to be tired, you're just, worn out and don't have the energy for it. I also think that, illness oftentimes can get in the way. It's something that can get in the way of it. But I mean more like not you're just feeling sick for a night, but that you have some things that come on that impact the way you feel about yourself.
Yeah. I mean, Lord knows as we get older, we got a whole list of ailments to talk about.
How's Joe's back, by the way?
And let me tell you, there's something. We got a list of them going on over here. So anyway, but yeah, so
how's your hamstring?
Exactly. Things like backs and hamstrings can definitely get in the way. But yeah, so for real, health concerns can get in the way. Menopause can get in the way, both emotionally and physically. Menopause has an impact. The stress of life. A lot of times, women are actively involved in raising their kids most of the time. And when you have kids clinging to you all day, needing something from you all day, sometimes the last thing you want is to be physically connected to another person at the end of the day. So I think that that's a big thing.
Yep. Also, it does lead into the idea that if you want to keep a healthy sex life going, you have to put effort into it.
Yes, for sure.
When it gets to, and that's the other piece is going back to what I was saying earlier, is whenever you first start seeing someone and you have the zhuzh, you don't have to put any effort into it. You're literally just trying to figure out where you can hide to have it all the time.
Sneaking off to the bathroom together at a party.
That's right. You're just, and so it's just built in, and that eventually you will get to a point where it's not built in because of all the things we just mentioned, and that you have to communicate more in order to make sure it happens, and then talking more about these things that interfere with how you're feeling or your ability to have it at all. So I think that it's huge. And I just want to bring it back around again. I can't say it enough. The other things that you need to have with your person are ultimately the things that are going to carry you to the end. And those are the
when you say other things, what are you talking about?
I mean, does this person make you laugh? Are you excited to share a meal with them at night and hear about their day? Do they come to you being a curious person that you feel like they're interested in you? And do they bring you joy?
Yeah. And can you communicate with them? And there are all those other things that are going to carry the relationship. And those things also impact having a satisfying sex life with that person.
Yeah. I'm going to tell on you, and Joe, you probably don't even remember this, but it's a kind of a good description of what I'm talking about, is that we were at I don't know if it was Leilani's 70th birthday gig or something. Anyway, it was in the barn, where we were. And Joe was looking behind something. I don't know it, because she's curious. She just can't, the girl's cat. she was peeking behind something that was on the wall that she probably should have been looking behind, but she couldn't help herself. And I was sitting there and I looked at you and you looked up at her and you just smiled and you said, I just love that girl. I do. I just love that girl. And, Joe was just being that funny, curious Joe that you love.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. That transcends time.
Yes. Like delighting in someone is the thing that's going to carry you through. And delighting in someone also is part of what makes them attractive in a sexual way. So I think all of that's tied in together. But don't get too wrapped up in just the sexual piece because there is more. No, I'm not saying that's not important, but I'm saying that is not the only important thing.
Yeah. And for dating, certainly I will say from, being a dater is that it is hard to know how to address this idea of sex. Like, when do you let it enter? How do you feel about that? Being open if you're having it with more than one person. Just the whole gamut of trying to get to know each other in that way. And if you're in the dating B, that is tricky because most women don't take to it. They don't naturally gravitate towards the fact that you might be doing that with somebody else.
Yeah, I think that is true. And I'll go back to something we talked about in one of our earliest episodes, which is lesbian sexual health, that you should always be mindful of taking care of your health. You should always be mindful of communicating with your partners about your sexual health. And lesbians tend to be in one of the lower risk categories for STIs and STDs because of the kind of sex that lesbians have, because there's not an actual penis going into the vagina. There might be
Again.
Yeah, again, there might be a penis going in, but it's one that you can put in the dishwasher.
You better read the instructions before you do that and make sure it's dishwasher safe.
You have a melted piece of purple wax.
That's gonna ruin all your dishes.
I feel like you gotta put that in there by itself. I don't think you should wash the dishes with that.
And this does bring me to another place. Like, don't share. No, there's no sharing.
Those are one person items, I think.
One person item.
That's just what I think.
Just sexual health and just
Other people got their own ideas about that, but I'm with you on this. It's a one person item. But anyway, back to the topic at hand. Yeah, I think that the main thing is that you want to make sure that you're communicating well with your person. And if you're sexually engaged with more than one person, like you're in the dating bee, I don't think that you have to give details about what you're doing with other people, but I think you just have to make it known that this is an option. So if the person's not comfortable with that, then they need to know up front, like it's a possibility that I might be sleeping with other people. And so just be upfront about it.
The other thing that I think lesbians are pretty good at in general, but is good to bring up, is there are a lot of different ways to have a sexy romantic evening that don't necessarily involve an orgasm. And they're just, and not discounting teeing up, cooking dinner, doing the candlelight thing, sitting down and just talking and really connecting with one another, because when you are in the throes of stress and all of those other things, that can feel really good. And if we're going on the journey and we're not focused on the destination.
Yep. And sometimes maybe that connection would lead to something sexual and sometimes it doesn't, and that's okay. But like you said, focusing on the journey, I think that's such an important piece.
Yeah. And the flip side of that is that I don't want to box women in so deeply that sometimes we just want the destination.
Mm-hmm. And that's okay.
Because that's okay too. So just saying that to you guys out there is just know that we get to work from a broad spectrum of opportunity, and that you can own that. If that feels like stress relief, then own it. And maybe that's what you want is, I just want to slam you against the wall and we're just going to do this thing.
Yep, that's true. That is true. So I want to talk about something that can become kind of a taboo topic, which is scheduling sex. So once you're in a relationship with someone, what are your thoughts about, scheduling sex? Like every Tuesday at 3, we meet at the house and get it on.
So I have friends, Monique and Veronica.
I know them.
That actually they've been married in a very long-term relationship. When they hear this, they'll know who they are. They schedule sex because they believed, and they didn't do that in the beginning, but they both committed to the fact that they felt like in their long-term relationship, it was important that it was happening on a pretty regular basis. And they are committed to the schedule, and they do. And I personally find that hard. I also know people that have tried it and then it eventually fades off. So I don't know. What do you think?
I am a big proponent of it. And as a therapist, I tell people this all the time, straight people and gay people. Again, with gay men, it doesn't tend to be as much of an issue because they're getting it on more than the rest of us, I think. At least the ones that come through my practice. But if the idea is like, it's just so, mundane to schedule sex every Friday, well, how much sex are you having if you don't schedule it? So would you rather wait and wait and wait for it to happen spontaneously? Or would you rather say, man, it may not feel that sexy, but let's have a date? Because what I say, and I say this particularly to women, I'm going off on kind of another tangent here, but for women, penetrative sex is super vulnerable because something's being placed inside of a woman's body, and that is a very vulnerable thing. Women are the receptive partner and men are an assertive partner in heterosexual sex. So for women to say yes to sex when they don't want to, it takes a toll. And so I never would advocate for a woman saying, okay, we'll do it, I don't want to. But what I do advocate for is saying, hey, let's get naked and see what happens. Because often if you get in bed with your partner, you're naked, you're close to each other, then you start to get turned on. And so then the sex becomes a willing thing. You're not just saying yes to it when you don't want to. And so that's the thing that a schedule can facilitate, that you're not forcing yourself to have sex every Friday at 3. But what you are doing is saying, I'm going to pause, I'm going to take this hour to connect with my partner. And if I didn't put it on the schedule, we probably wouldn't pause our lives to do this.
That's great advice, and I can see why that would be effective. I think for people who are dating, the big takeaway on that is having the discussions in your dating life about the commitment you have towards that connection. And that you're talking about whether or not you agree that it's important enough that you do something that keeps it going, whether it be on the schedule, whatever the opportunities are, that you have a date night once a month. And that involves no phones. And then there would be some type of physical connection afterwards or whatever that is. I believe that you should at some point at the appropriate time in your dating world, if you think that if you're dating somebody and you really think you're going to move it to relationship status, I think you need to have those conversations about that commitment.
For sure. And like you were talking about your friends Monique and Veronica, they both recognize the importance of that physical intimacy. And even if their biology wasn't driving them to jump in the bed with each other, they were aware enough to know that that's an important thing to keep alive. And I think that that's a super healthy way to look at it.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. So if you are someone who's perhaps been with your partner for a long time and maybe your relationship is starting to feel more like a roommate relationship instead of intimate, what do you think, Rachel, are some ways that you could reignite that spark with your person?
I think that you can surprise them with something romantic, something that they're not expecting. I think that you can. The other thing is really being brave enough to show your desire towards them without them stoking it up. because that is vulnerable, but it can be to the other person amazing that you're kind of showing this, like, I want you, like maybe right now.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna come at you.
Uh-huh.
Without having to have all the permissions and, all of that you kind of go after somebody. It helps someone feel desirable when you think maybe you aren't anymore.
Yeah, for sure. And the risk for the person who's making the initiative is that they might get rejected. And so that often stops people from doing it. So having some conversation around that, what will you do if I come on to you and the answer is no? Like, how will we handle that gently with each other? And just talking about ways to sort of enter that situation if it's not coming so naturally anymore.
Yeah. Also, I mean, the obvious is if you really feel like you're stuck, I mean, it's something you go to see a therapist about. Don't wait until you let it do damage. And also highly recommend just generally seeking either good counsel on where you are in your dating relationship as it relates to sex if you don't feel comfortable talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. If you don't feel comfortable talking about it, that's an issue that's big enough to prompt going to talk to a therapist about it. So I think the other thing you can do with your partner is you can sort of revisit your turn-ons and your turn-offs. I mean, maybe things have changed since you got together many years ago. And so talking about that, about if there's anything new that you'd like to explore or try, or, any kind of new dynamics, or maybe a new toy or a new fantasy or things like that. If you haven't talked about it in a while, bring it up and have a conversation about it.
Oh, yeah. Just talking about it can be nice.
Yeah, it can actually spark a little connection. Figuring out what intimacy means to both of you, that this doesn't always have to be penetrative sex, that it could be some other kind of connection that works for both of you. And I think one of the biggest things is that if you have things going on outside the bedroom in your relationship, if you have other relationship issues, that can definitely get in the way. So make sure that you are addressing those with each other and maybe also with a therapist.
Yes. And in dating, it is important that if you have we talked about, so many women have either been violated in an inappropriate fashion, have body issues. I do think if you're the person that has them, it's vulnerable to expose those, but if you're going to move forward with somebody, they need to know what those are. You need to help them with that so that they can not step on the landmines.
Yeah.
And that the person receiving that needs to hold those dearly and understand, open yourself up to the idea that those are precious and you got to be careful with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what are some of the takeaways that we want our listeners to get from this episode?
One big one is I would love to begin the process of debunking the lesbian bed death term, because the fact is, across all long-term relationships, sex wanes.
Yes, so it's not just a lesbian thing. It's a relationship thing.
Right. And yes, that's one thing.
Yes. And I think the second thing is don't panic if this starts to happen to you, but also don't ignore it and don't let it get too far down the road, because the longer it goes and the harder it is to re-enter that situation.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Yeah.
Well, and also sort of a call to action is talk to your partner, and that just, you have to be able to talk. And for some people, I know it's not easy. Normalizing scheduling, and we just talked about that a little bit, that if what Sarah talked about doesn't fit exactly with you, figure out what does. Some version of that with your person.
Yep, absolutely. And just knowing, like, it's okay if that desire isn't constant, that if you're not wanting sex all day, every day, because cycles of connection and cycles of distance are normal within a relationship. But the thing that matters the most is whether you're talking about it and how you're communicating. So, we can't emphasize that enough, that you got to keep talking about things.
We sure appreciate y'all listening to us talk about penises and vaginas.
We sure do. That, my friends, is a wrap for today. So if this episode resonated with you, please share it with a friend who you know might be in the throes of lesbian bed death. They can use your help. And when you share, it helps us grow. We are trying to grow our following and grow our numbers. So please send this episode to a friend who might laugh at it or benefit from it. We need you. We need your listens and we need your shares.
So what's our next episode?
Ooh, you're going to love our next episode. Our topic next time is going to be, is she a fun drunk or a red flag? We're going to talk about substance use in relationships. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about sobriety in relationships and kind of how to look for things that might send up a red flag right at the beginning so we can spare you some pain down the road. But meanwhile, if you have any funny or sad stories for that matter about lesbian bed death moments, we'll be talking about these in our after party episode, so be sure to tune into that. Meanwhile, please follow us. Please subscribe. We are on Apple Podcasts. We are on Spotify, kind of all the places you find your podcasts. If you want to see our gorgeous faces, you can look at our podcast on YouTube. All those are at Dateable AF. And as always, thank you for listening to the Dateable AF podcast, where we help you find your happy ending.
And remember, be bold, be kind, and for the love of queer dating, don't text your ex. Stay dateable
AF.